We'll briefly discuss the 8 most valuable businesses in history in this video before focusing on number 1 because it has such an interesting backstory. This firm was so big that it literally transformed the geography of the planet as we know it. Okay, let's get started. At number 8, we have Microsoft. At the height of the dot-com bubble in 1999, the corporation had a value of $0.9 trillion. Number 7 is Apple in 2018. This is brought about by the iPhone's enduring appeal, which accounts for around 70% of the business's earnings. However, there is some speculation that the trillion-dollar stock figure is more difficult than it appears because of the low interest rates, which make it possible for the corporation to repurchase its own stock and drive up the stock price. At number 6, we have Standard Oil. This business was valued $1 trillion in 1900. The American government quickly divided Standard Oil into, well, pretty much every significant American oil corporation. At number 5, we have PetroChina. They were worth $1.4 trillion in 2007, and this occurred shortly before the GFC, at the height of the oil price. The 4th most valuable company of all time is Saudi Aramco, valued at $4.1 trillion at its peak in 2010. From this point on, we have to travel hundreds of years in the past to get to the true heavyweights. At number 3 and 2, respectively, of the South Sea Company worth $4.3 trillion and the Mississippi Company worth $6.5 trillion, both in 1720. Of course, these numbers are adjusted for inflation. It's extremely intriguing how these exorbitant prices came to be. Around the speculative trade between North and South America in 1720, a bubble developed. The shares of the two corporations mentioned increased as a result of their assurances that they would be able to profit from trade across the American continents. The term millionaire was created by the speculators on these businesses. Mass trade between the Americas never truly materialized, and the bubble quickly burst. Okay, so on to number 1. Valued at a ridiculous $7.9 trillion in 1637 is the Dutch East India Company. The Dutch East India Company's history is incredibly fascinating. The story begins in the Netherlands during a historical period known as the Golden Century, which spans from 1601 to 700. Amsterdam was one of the richest cities in the world during this time due to its robust international trade. All nations primarily generated their income through trade. The Dutch government was concerned about England gaining a monopoly in trade in 1600. In order to counter this threat, they supported the establishment of the Dutch East India Company in 1602 and permitted the company to monopolize commerce in Asia. The business swiftly rose to prominence as one of the major participants in the spice trade between Europe and Indonesia. Although they may not seem like much now, spices were incredibly important and hard to come by in the past. They were employed in medicine to enhance the flavor of meat and preserve cooked food. The quality of life is actually improved by spices. One of the most significant businesses in history is the Dutch East India Company. And one of the factors contributing to this was the fact that it was the first business to list on the first stock market in history. From there, it grew steadily until it peaked with 70,000 workers. That was more than 1% of the world's population in the year 1600s. The firm operated their own shipyards, established a network of hundreds of sites, and had everything from offices to warehouses and heavy workstations while working for this one corporation. Dutch East India Company built their own army to guard the new territory they had acquired in order to maintain their ports and continue trading. And this is the point at which things start to become unimaginably complicated for any business today. The firm expanded, giving their foreign colonies additional and a semblance of governmental authority. The Dutch East India Company had the authority to start new colonies, negotiate treaties, mint its own money, and even fight war. Even in the early 1600s, the firm was employed to fight against the Spanish Dominion. And keep in mind that the firm performing all of this was publicly traded. But it doesn't end there. There were also lengthy sailing voyages that led to the discovery of new territory. It turns out that the Dutch East India Company played a significant role in influencing modern geography. They effectively changed from a business entity into a state and ultimately an empire, remaining in operation for 2 centuries. We now know that the enterprise began by trading spices and eventually became a despotic empire. But what was the company's most lucrative venture? The solution isn't what you'd anticipate. Their riches peaked in the flower industry, tulips specifically, and the tale of how it occurred will live on in legend. It narrates a complex archetypal tale. Human nature doesn't change despite advancements in technology. The first tulip was brought to Europe from Turkey to Amsterdam in 1554. The plants gained appeal as soon as they were regarded as unusual items. In addition to this, having tulips in your yard became a significant prestige symbol. Tulips take between 7 and 12 months to flower, and they only bloom for approximately a week. Tulips were a great choice for the first financial bubble in history because of their rarity, reputation as a status symbol, and high worth. The bubble in tulips. You know, the Dutch were the foreigners of contemporary finance at the time. They came up with a plan to create a market where tulips could be traded year-round, even when they weren't in flower. Traders who entered into tulip contracts based on future values fixed the pricing. The first futures derivative market, the same kind that we use to trade equities today, was established with this. The tulip market evolved over time, and prices for blooms were determined by their scarcity. Things often spiral out of control in derivative markets, as with all markets. Speculators who intend to sell the tulips for a profit often drive the price of the flowers steadily higher. The exact same process takes place in all current financial bubbles. From home flippers who count on the next person to pay for it, to stock and bond traders who act in a similar manner. Human nature, as I stated, doesn't change. To buy a few tulip bulbs for a bigger profit than they could ever hope to make in their lifetimes, several merchants sold everything they owned. In the 1630s, the typical person could only hope to live for less than 40 years and would be fortunate to make any money at all. Some tulip merchants were making the equivalent of $62,000 per month in the meantime. Everyone wanted in on the tulips because it appeared to be a direct route to paradise. The Dutch East India Company included the tulip trade in their activities during the buildup and peak of the tulip mania, and the stock price started to soar. At this point, tulip trading on the London Stock Exchange was taking place even between England and France. The price increase continued to accelerate, and within a month there was a 20-fold price explosion. In order to give you an idea, consider that during their pinnacle, a single tulip bulb was worth 10 times the craftsman's yearly salary. By this time, the Dutch East India had reached its infamous $7.9 trillion valuation. One more again, to emphasize how significant this was. The Dutch East India Company was valued 3 times as much as Apple, Microsoft, and Google put together. You may be wondering what happened next because of this. The tulip bubble burst in late 1636, much like all other bubbles. What then led to the collision? It turned out that a few of the North Holland bidders chose not to attend the usual tulip bulb auctions. It sent a message to the market that customers would simply not be willing to pay more for the plant. Tulip prices decreased slightly as a result of this occurrence. Then, investors changed their minds and decided to sell. Consequently, the price decreased even further. As the price dropped, other people made the decision to sell as well. The cycle kept going. The market quickly imploded violently. Tulip bulbs lost all of their previous value in a matter of weeks. This led to a complete panic in Holland and a long-lasting economic collapse. Later, the Dutch government altered the banking system to ensure that such an occurrence wouldn't occur again. The Dutch East India Company, then, what? How did they fare? Up to the middle of the 17th century, the corporation was still very strong. However, the firm was disbanded and taken over by the government in 1799 as a result of poor administration and a conflict between the English and the Dutch. And the company's colonies were transformed into Dutch colonies. What does this indicate, then? The tulip bubble illustrates the greed and character of people. Like many other things in life, it's crucial to consider something's true value rather than merely what other people believe it's worth. The magnitude of the Dutch East India Company is unmatched in the modern era. They were a complete self-contained government. On the one hand, I suppose it serves as a warning about the close relationships between business and the government, but on the other hand, they did discover new places, which helped shape modern geography. They also helped fund Forever by founding a firm that traded on the stock market. Overall though, I just found that to be an utterly amazing tale that I wanted to share with you. The video has ended at this point. I appreciate you coming. Feel free to subscribe if you're new to this channel. please feel free to share this video with anyone you think would be interested in the subject if you know any. Anyway, that's it, and I'll see you for the next video real soon.